Look, the goal for today is going to be to get through this review without comparing Priory of the Orange Tree to Game of Thrones, in particular the last season. But unfortunately, I think it might also be the right comparison. Hi, I'm Deboki, and this is Okie Dokie Boki, and today I am going to be reviewing The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. The Priory of the Orange Tree is a fantasy novel. It was published in February this year. It is set in this world where, like, at one point, like, all, like, evil boiled down to this fire-breathing dragon named the Nameless One. This Nameless One was just kind of like going around wreaking havoc with his army of fellow fire-breathing dragons, only to disappear under mysterious circumstances. 1,000 years later, the world is now divided kind of based on how they have decided that this mystery disappearance happened. The West, which is primarily ruled by the kingdom of Virtuedom, that is what it's called, believes that like this was like a whole knight in shining armor situation. Meanwhile, in the East, they believe that the real reason for victory was their water dragon buddies, gods. And you know, like the West hates dragons because, like, yeah, the Nameless One was a dragon. And so for 1,000 years, the East and the West have literally just like not talked to each other. There's no trade between them. They are not pro each other, and this is a problem because there are some lingering signs that the Nameless One is returning. And all of this sets up a backdrop for a multi-POV epic that is mostly centered around two characters. In the West, we have Ede, who is not actually from the West. Ede is part of a secret, like, mage cult, and she has been sent on this super secret mission to protect Queen Sabran of Virtuedom, but Queen Sabran is not allowed to know that she is here to protect her because in Virtuedom, magic is not really, you know, encouraged. Meanwhile, in the East, we have Tane, a young woman who is like on the cusp of a dragon rider, which sounds like legitimately super awesome. There are two other POV characters. There is an alchemist named Nicolai Roos, who for a time lived in Queen Sabran's court but was then exiled to the East. There's also Lord Ardalith Beck, who is a friend of Eden Sabran's, but who accidentally ends up in some courtly intrigue and also kind of ends up exiled. There was a lot of hype for this book this year, and I think the main reason I was intrigued by it, the main thing that made me want to read it, was the fact that it seems centered around three women, Ede, Tane, and Queen Sabran, and in particular how their potential worldviews were going to come into conflict or potentially explain each other. It sounded like this really fleshed out, complicated world, and I was really intrigued to learn more. At first, that is really like what happened. It started out super fascinating with these religions. It's really cool to see how, like, even though they're built on that same, you know, fundamental event, they've come up with like very different explanations, very different stories. And there's, like, you know, a vein of truth in that to, like, to how, you know, we have approached religion overall. In particular, like, you know, in a lot of multi-POV epics, there's a lot of times there's one character who you're particularly excited by, and for me it was Ede. I was really into this, like, fine balance that she's maintaining between the religion that she is, like, been raised in, that she so, like, deeply believes in, that she has completely uplifted her life in service of a queen whose religion she doesn't agree with in a very fundamental way, and that is so key to a lot of people's life. That tension was super interesting, and I love seeing how she shifted in response to it over the course of the book. There's all these initial contradictions between these religions, and it's set up in a way that like it's a mystery. Like, you're trying to understand, why do they all disagree so much? And it's complemented by a lot of other mysteries surrounding the characters. Like, why does someone keep trying to kill Sabran, and why has one of the kingdoms of the West suddenly become like dragon worshiping? Like, there's all of these weird events that are going on that you're trying to understand, like, how they kind of align with each other. And at the beginning, there's also a lot of initial intrigue that I found super engrossing. Ede's position is rising in the court, which, you know, it's kind of helping her better achieve her goals, but also is putting her in a more precarious position, a position that becomes even more fraught as she starts developing feelings for Sabran. Meanwhile, Tane, over back in the East, she has spent her whole life aspiring to be a dragon rider, but on the literal eve of her making that dream come true, true, she has to make a decision that could like potentially put that whole thing in jeopardy. And the book starts out so strong in part, I think, because of these parallel arcs. There's Eid and Tane as well as Sabran. These are three women who are very much deciding their lives around their ambitions, and I love that to begin with. And on top of them, there's this really interesting arc for all three of them, and it was really cool to see how this parallel between the three of them, where like this ambition they're so clearly invested in, they begin to get to the point where they can realize it, only to find all the new complications that are arising as the real result of their success settle in. Unfortunately, when it comes to like the big intrigue, the nameless one, things go downhill from there. I just didn't realize how downhill it was going until I got to the end, and I was like, oh, like that's it. The nameless one is like a really bad superhero villain. Like you don't know what their motivations are. Like you don't know why they're so bad. You just know they're bad because they're bad. They smash things, I guess. The book really fails to like make me understand why I should give a shit about the nameless one. Like I know that they're hurting people in the book and I don't want people to get hurt, but like it's about as effective as like getting mad at an earthquake, because the nameless one and their whole army is so like one-dimensional. And even worse than having a boring villain was the really super boring plan to defeat him. It literally just boils down to 2 jewels and a sword. And I would like to take a moment to appreciate the irony that in a book that is so centered around powerful women, the climax, and I apologize for this, the climax of the story boils down to 2 precious balls and a phallic symbol. The problem is that there are parts of this world that are complex, built on these real contradictions that are fascinating to unwrap. But I think one of the issues is that Shannon doesn't quite know how to resolve things without basically oversimplifying them. You know, whether it's oversimplifying, you know, the way that you're gonna defeat your big bad, or basically simplifying these religions to the bare stories that they're built on. She over-resolves the contradictions between them, filling in every plot hole in these religions. It's as if those holes explain all of that millennia of tension. Along those lines, I want to point out that the religion of the West is much, much, much more developed than the religion of the East, which is frustrating in part just like in a general way about how books approach like Western inspired cultures versus Eastern inspired cultures. It also just weakens the story a lot. And this becomes especially apparent as the narratives come together from the East and the West. With the first part of the book, Shannon has like kind of created these like really nice, interesting strands of story, but she's a lot less adept at weaving them together. Like within like I think the last maybe like 30 to 40% of the book, you can really start to see the themes of this book. Like you can see that things are happening just to make certain events happen at the right time or certain characters be in the right place. Things just like happen to characters to kind of temporarily knock them out of commission. Sort of like, you know, like in the last Hunger Games book in Mockingjay, you know, Mockingjay? Yeah, Mockingjay. When like Katniss would suddenly just be like knocked out and then she would wake up and then you would find out all of the story that happened. There's sort of like a similar vibe to that where characters will just get knocked out. But it's not necessarily to like, you know, flash forward the story. It's more to make sure that other characters then have a reason to go to a certain place, but it just doesn't really gel well together. It's like you can see the book being built on a chessboard, but all the pieces are knights and they're just like kind of jumping erratically around the board. This is the second time I reviewed a book in like a few months where like my review basically boils down to like I loved the first half of the book and did not like the second half. The last time I did this was with Princess Bari. I did a full review if you want to know my thoughts there. But the thing with Princess Bari is that even though I loved this first half and found the second half frustrating, overall like I thought there was a lot to the book that still made it like so that when I finished, I was glad I read it. Like the second half of the book didn't invalidate how much I enjoyed the first half of the book. With this, I got to the second half of the book and I don't know, it really kind of undid a lot of the goodwill that I had from the first half. I don't know, maybe it's because the book is so long, but I think really it's because like there was this huge pacing shift. Like the first half of the book, some people might find it too slow. I really liked the way that it kind of gradually built things up. For me, it really worked. And then the last, like, yeah, 30–40%, that things are happening super fast just to kind of get the plot done. And that shift in pacing really sort of magnified the weaknesses of the book, because you just see all the things that are not really quite coming together well. I would not have started an 800-page book if I didn't think I would like it. I got 400 pages into this book and thought I was going to love it. Unfortunately, I read the next 400 pages and it turned out I was wrong. But if you disagree with me, if you loved it, or if you want to commiserate on how you two did not like this book, let me know your thoughts down below, and thank you guys for watching. Bye!